The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today and had a nice weekend, especially considering the weather. Such a wonderful weather weekend for us. My name's Chris Congleton. I'm going to be opening up for Keith Cottle. He's going to be talking about the design executive summary, and he's given an informational overview for us, which should be very valuable to designers and project managers, but also just everybody as a whole, just because the process itself is important for everyone to know and understand. Again, we'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank Keith for taking the time to get this together and give this information. It's also very important to us because there's actually been a change in the design executive summary form, so this should be, I don't know how many people have used it, but it'll probably be an update for at least some of us, including me. Just a little bit of our upcoming schedule for our webinars. On September 2nd, Brad Eldridge is going to be giving us a webinar on pay estimates and consultant monthly reports, which should be invaluable to consultants and also to KYTC employees as well, just how those things are worked out. October 14th, Jennifer McCleve is actually going to give us a run-through on the KYTC, which stands for Kentucky Utility and Rails Tracking System, which is something that's been implemented and designed by our technical gurus here at KYTC. And it's actually a kind of a cutting-edge kind of thing there that is right now being implemented and helping out a lot in the utilities and rails branch. So we thank both of them for giving us that information here in the future. If you're actually wanting to go back and look at some of our past webinars, you could actually go to the KYTC Highway Design Software and Support page. If you look at this red arrow here, it'll actually, if you go to our highway design page, you can click on our software and support link there. It'll take you to where you can look at our past webinars. It'll actually redirect you to YouTube, which is very handy. I don't know about you all, but I forget stuff, and it's nice to go back and be able to review those webinars when you need them. If anybody has any questions while they're working one day and they can't quite figure out what's going wrong or can't quite figure out how to do something, send us an email at kytcCADsupport@ky.gov. Again, if you have any questions about MicroStation, inroads, project-wise, we can typically answer most questions, if not all questions. I can't think of one that wasn't answered well or we couldn't get an answer for. Some take a little more time than others, but eventually they usually get resolved. We have some good people here that can really get you some information. A couple of reminders, and for those of you that attended the webinars before, I know we do this over and over. It's kind of the same thing. We're just trying to get you that information to you. For those new people and the old people, because like me, I forget. But you have to be present for the entire webinar to earn your professional development hours. We actually have monitoring software that tells us how long people attend the webinars. And if you don't attend the entire webinar, if you ever get audited, well, you're not going to get those hours, and people can kind of be in trouble. I've been audited. It's no fun, but it's something that they do. What you can do is you can actually watch as a group and get your professional development hours. If you do that, it's highly suggested that you actually make and sign a sign-in sheet so you have evidence of your attendance for the webinar. And you can actually gain those PDHs just in case you ever get audited. Also, if you could, please don't forget to participate in our survey at the end of the webinar. It really helps us out to determine what kind of things that you're learning from our webinars, as well as upcoming webinars you'd like to see, subjects you'd like to be informed about. Also, we actually had some technical difficulties last time on our Clearview webinar, in which apparently the survey at the end of the webinar, it took a little time to come up. And if you're like me, when my computer starts spinning, I assume the worst and shut it down. Apparently, some people didn't, and it actually came up. So if you could just give it a little time at the end to kind of think about doing the survey, and so we can get that information from you. Also in this webinar, we have handouts. It's actually the DES Informational Overview handout, which actually give you information about the webinar. It should be valuable to you after the webinar as reference, as well as during the webinar if you actually want to follow through with it. Follow through with that document as we're doing the webinar. One of the things that we tried last time, and it didn't work so well, we tried allowing people to raise their hands at the end of the webinar to ask questions instead of just being able to type in a question and have it answered. Unfortunately, apparently nobody had their microphone set up for those people. We actually had Carolyn Weber raise her hand. She went down in the annals of history as being the first historic person to ever raise her hand and try to ask a question. Unfortunately, her mic wasn't working. So if you actually want to be able to raise your hand, you can actually go to the audio tab. And if you look here, if you're over the telephone, I'm not exactly sure if you can ask a question over the telephone. You should be able to. But here at mic and speakers, if you're clicked on that, you can do a sound check. And if you click on that little link there, it'll allow you to set up a microphone and speakers. It'll allow you to check and see if your mic is working by a little volume indicator. So while you're talking, it'll move back and forth and show you that you're actually able to speak. In this case, if you look at this one, it says it's missing a mic. So you actually have to have a mic hooked up, obviously. And also, if you don't know where the handouts are on this control panel, if you hit the plus right there, and it'll actually show you your handout so you can download it. So I kind of wanted to point that out for everybody who may want to actually raise their hand and actually this time go down the annals of history of actually being able to audibly ask a question. So right now, let's go to some poll questions. These are our typical poll questions. If you've been to a webinar before, we'll wait for people to load in here. Okay, give a little bit more time for people to vote or change their vote. Hoping to get up to 90% voting here, which would be nice. Okay, we're right about 90% now. I'll go ahead and close the poll. Looks like about 70% of you have actually been to a previous webinar, which is great. And 31% of you didn't come to the last one, which is fine. If you want to go back and look at that, again, you can go to the KYTC webpage or actually Google support and software, KYTC support and software, and you can look at those webinars. So, and that was a good webinar for those KYTC employees that missed that. I'm not sure the consultants would gain much from that, but the KYTC employees would. Okay, on to the next poll. Again, this is one we've done before. Asking how many you've attended. Okay, we're just over 90% participation there, so we'll close out and share our information. It looks like about 40% of you have actually been to at least one webinar, which is great. About another 40% of you have been between 6 and 10, which is great also. And 20% of you have been to greater than 10 webinars, which is wonderful. We're getting out there and getting a lot of information to people who are craving this, which is great. That's wonderful. Glad you all are attending. Keep coming back. Again, this is information we can get out there to people and hopefully help you guys out. Okay, right now we'll go ahead and move on to the presentation. Again, we want to thank Keith for presenting this to us and getting this together. This is one of our more important webinars, so I hope you all will gain some information from this and be able to use it in your daily work. So here we go.
The DES form was updated with the Chapter 200 design manual rewrite that's currently taking place, and the most up-to-date version of this DES form is available on the Highway Design web page in the Design Form section. We'll take you there right quick and show you where it's at. It's in the Highway Design web page in the Highway Design Forms, and as you'll notice, there are several other documents in there. But as we update the DES summary, it should be in this location. The first section that I'll be talking about is the general information section of the Design Executive Summary. Most of this general project information can be found in the pre-con report, the project manager's toolbox, funding authorization forms, just various locations. An example of the state program would be the EMARS number. Here's an example of what that would look like. And if your project has federal funds, you can find that information on the PR1 funding authorization form. The next section is the existing condition sections. First off, your traffic counts and your truck percentages. As early in the project process as possible, traffic information should be requested from the Division of Planning. And here's also if you want to look at some other locations for some existing counts, Planning has a traffic counts web page that you can go to and get information as well. The next thing is the truck classification. In Kentucky, we have single A, double A, and triple A. This was done per KRS 189.222, which requires weight limits on state-maintained highways. Also, the planning web page has some maps that can show you where those are and what those classifications are. You have the statewide map that shows you the different routes and the truck weight classifications on those routes. The National Highway System is another checkbox in there. The NHS was developed by the DOT in cooperation with the states and local officials and MPOs. And then it was it includes the interstate highway system as well as other roads important to the nation's economy, defense, and mobility. It crosses state lines pretty much. And again, Planning has a web page that shows the National Highway System. It's something I'd like to note that you might ask, well, why do we need to know the truck classification and the truck percentages? Well, this may help you decide what your design vehicle is. If you've got a project that's got a lot of trucks, you may want to use a WD-40, WB-50, and it also may help you decide if you really want to reduce that lane width or reduce that shoulder width. Some other areas of the existing conditions is the NEN, that's the National Truck Network. The Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 authorized the establishment of a national network of highways designated for use by large trucks. On these highways, there's federal regulations concerning the width and the lengths. There's a federal code that establishes this. I'll just show that to you, so you know where it came from. Maybe it's not going to show up here. Let's go to the planning documents that tells you where the truck networks are. Okay, looks like these are not going to cooperate for me, so we'll go. But there is actually on the Kentucky Division of Planning website. There's documents that talk about the national truck network. They're statewide and they're also for metro areas. So that's where you would go to find that information. The next checkbox is the extended weight coal or coal byproducts haul road system. Basically, this is a system that's updated every year that tells you what routes trucks haul coal on than the previous year. See if I can get this one to work. Yeah, this one. So here, this, pretty much in the eastern and in the western part of the state, you'll find a lot of those roadways. And again, knowing if it's on the national truck network or extended weight, it might help you decide what your design vehicle needs to be, and if you really want to reduce that lane width and shoulder width. The next area is the information about the existing functional classification. The current pull-down menus for this is urban, rural, local, collector, arterial, or interstate. You can use our existing highway information database to kind of help you out with what this would be on the existing facility. And again, the terrain classifications refer to the general character of the surrounding terrain of a given route. Engineering judgment should be used to determine what terrain exists along that project corridor. The HIS is also a good place to get this information. And the pull-down menu gives the option of level, rolling, and mountainous. The posted speed limit would be the posted speed limit for the project. If there is not a posted speed limit, then you would use the statutory speed limit per KRS 189.39. I'll see if I can pull that one up. Okay, that was not wanting to work either. And here's a link to the highway information system in the planning. It gives you get a lot of existing information for the various routes in the state at this location here. The proposed conditions section. Again, we added a proposed design functional classification. It was added to allow for situations where the proposed corridor might end up being classified differently than the existing situation. There may be a rural local roadway through an area that ends up being a collector roadway due to several new developments being added along with new intersections, new approach roads along the route. The template could possibly even go from a rural with a shoulder to a curb and gutter section. So we thought it would be a good idea to give you an opportunity for those special projects where you have a change in design functional class. And again, as early in the project process as possible, your traffic information should be requested from the Division of Planning. The design year is typically 20 years beyond the projected construction completion date, but it doesn't have to be 20 years. You can refer to the access control minimum spacing. You can refer to our KYTC design manual, chapter 1100, for the different types of access control. And also 603 KER 5.120 discusses this in length as well. The current pull downs are by permit, partial controlled, and fully controlled access. And next is our controlling criteria section. FHWA has identified 13 controlling criteria as having substantial importance to the operational and safety performance of any highway. Special attention should be paid to these controlling criteria in developing the design decisions for your project. You can refer to FHWA's mitigation strategies for design exceptions, July 2007, for more information. KYTC has developed this DES form to better reflect these controlling criteria and to provide documentation of the project design decisions, along with an avenue to document any design exceptions to the controlling criteria. The first part of this is the design speed definition. A selected speed used to determine the various design features of the roadway. So selected speed establishes the range of values for many of the other geometric elements. You can refer to the Design Manual section HD 703 for additional information. The existing column for the speed was put in there so you could estimate the design speed of the existing roadway within the project corridor. This may be helpful information when you're trying to evaluate what your selected design speed to use for the project, or in asking for an exception to the recommended design speed. The actual guidance for design speed, the recommended minimum design speed is based upon the type of terrain and design volume. And there's a table in each of the functional classification chapters that give you this, the recommended minimum design speed based on the type of terrain that you're in and the design volume that you're using for your project. That is what you should put in here, that minimum design speed from either from the Green Book chapters for the functional classifications or the KYTC Common Practices exhibits also have this information as well, and they're broken out in urban and rural facilities. The selected design speed for the project, this may be the same as the ASTO value in the tables, or it could be greater than or less than. And also please note that the value that for the other elements in these other columns are based upon your selected design speed ASTO minimums. You may have a ASTO minimum recommendation of 30 miles per hour, but because your existing was 35 miles per hour for some reason, they've been posted, or it may have just the terrain, the geometrics may meet at 35 miles per hour. You may decide to use a 35 instead of a 30, and then that would be okay. You would put the 35 mile an hour ASTO minimum criteria in these other columns. The recommended design speed is the speed chosen for your project. The other area, the lane width, shoulder width, bridge width, maximum grade, horizontal radius, stopping side distance, normal cross slope, maximum super elevation rate, and vertical clearance are some of the other controlling criteria that we're using on our KYTC DES. The existing roadway information can be obtained from survey data, HIS database, microfilm records. You just put this information in this column here. The guidance for the proposed lane width, minimum usable shoulder width, bridge clear width, maximum grade, all these items through here, those would be what whatever your selected design speed is, that would be the minimum ASTO criteria would go in this column, or the common practices exhibits as well. Or if you've got a very low volume local road, you can actually decide to use that book to come up with your minimum criteria. Please note that the DES form is in the process of being updated and should be on the web page shortly. Is that we have combined the minimum stopping side distance that it used to be horizontal and crest, sag vertical curves, and we actually combined back to just minimum stopping side distance the way that it used to be. And that should be posted on the Highway Design web page in the forms library soon. The actual geometrics the use for the project should be shown in the recommendation column. These are the actual radiuses that you used for the project. The recommended should be equal to or greater than the selected ASTO guidance. If not, then the design exception will be needed for that particular element. Some more items in the control criteria. Again, your existing super rates and vertical clearances, you can get that from your survey data, maybe a HIS database, microfilm. The KYTC maximum super elevation rate is 8%. You can refer to a Design Manual section HD 702 and the Green Book super elevation tables for further guidance. ASTO geometric design of very low volume local roads may also be utilized for very low volume roadways. And your minimum vertical clearance under overpasses, please note this is required to across the entire roadway width, including the usable shoulder. So you have to meet vertical clearance across your usable shoulder as well. Again, for detailed information concerning vertical clearance guidelines, refer to KYTC chapter HD 900, intersections, in the actual Green Book. And also, if you're working with interstates, you need to refer to a policy on design standards interstate system. Actual geometric values used for the project, again, should be shown in the recommended column. The recommended should be equal to or greater than the selected AASHTO guidance. If not, then the design exception would be needed for that particular element as well. Okay, now the other criteria section. This section provides a space to discuss other geometric elements that although they're not considered part of FHWA's 13 controlling criteria, they may be an important design consideration on a project. And it should be noted that all these items don't require an exception. If recommended is below the typical guidance, a variance may be warranted. For instance, if you have a 4-foot sidewalk and it's all that you can fit into a project, although this meets ADA, it doesn't meet KYTC's 5-foot recommended sidewalk, so you would probably want to check that there's a variance there. And as another example, our typical berm width is 10 foot. You may only be able to get a 6-foot berm on a particular project, and you would note that in here and show it as a design variance. And again, I'll go over the existing information. Can use existing roadway information from survey data, HIS database, microfilm. The guidance for the various AASHTO elements can be found in publication including a KYTC design manual, the AASHTO Green Book, the AASHTO Geometric Design for very low volume local roads, AASHTO Guide for Planning, Design, and Operation of Pedestrian Facilities, AASHTO's Guide for the Development of Bicycle Facilities, and the Public Access Right-of-Way Guidance, the PRORAG. The actual geometric values used for the project should be shown in the recommendation column. And as I mentioned earlier, as an example, if the recommendation should be equal to or greater than the selected, if not, then the design variance would be needed for that particular element. Now we'll go to page 2. This is the talking about the design criteria notes. This area was basically you can use this to know which AASHTO publications that you use to come up with your selected criteria. Also, why the selected recommended design speed was chosen. This space could also be used to briefly explain reasons for a design exception or variance of an element. But however, any exceptions or variances should be explained in detail within the DES write-up per discussion item number 6. The environmental action for the project should be chosen from the pull-down menu along with the date the document was approved or the estimated completion date. Currently, the pull-down menu has options for an overview, a CE for minor projects, CE Level 1, CE Level 2, CE Level 3, EA FONSI, or an EIS. The existing pavement depths, you can utilize pavement cores or estimate from the archive plans to determine the existing pavement depth within a project when necessary. Okay, for the various sections within the DES, that was the forum. Now we're going to talk about the report itself. The typical sections, including bridges. The typical sections should include legible text. It should be noted that the DES typical sections do not need to be as detailed as the final plan typicals. The various template widths, slope breaks, slopes, and paved, non-paved shoulder areas should be dimensioned and noted. Showing pavement depths and pavement details isn't necessary for the DES typicals. The map showing project location. The location map should be legible and allow the reader to easily figure out where the project is located, along with the approximate project limits. Project overview and existing conditions. This should include a brief summary of the intent of the project, information about where the project is located and the existing conditions along the corridor and within the project limits. You know, this should include pavement and shoulder widths, horizontal, vertical deficiencies, site distance issues, drainage, flooding issues, existing or planned developments within the project limits, and any other details that may be relevant to the project. Purpose and need statement. The purpose and need of the project provides the foundation for successful decision making and the basis for evaluating the alternatives. Please note that the purpose and need statement is not the highway plan description. The statement should answer, what is the project trying to accomplish and why is it necessary? For good detailed information, please refer to the below document, Purpose and Need Statement Guidance and Instructions, located on Highway Design webpage under Other Resources. I will see if I can pull this one up. And for some reason, it's not letting me pull up a lot of these documents. We'll go on. Here's an example of a fairly good DES typical section. Note that it only shows the dimensions and slopes of the roadway, the shoulder dimension and slopes and breaks, your roadside slopes and dimensions. It doesn't show your pavement schedule, and you really don't even really need to show the pavement depths on this, but they did in this example, but you really wouldn't have to. It just adds clutter to what we're trying to accomplish in the DES typical. Here's an example of a good project location map. It tells you where it's at in the state, what county, a little bit more detailed of the surrounding routes, and then it gets down to where the project is and approximate beginning and end stations. You could easily, a person could look at the DES and look at this map and easily determine where the project is located. And just a note, information on how to generate this layout sheet can be found on Highway Design's webpage under Software and Support at the following link. Okay, we'll go on to number 5, discussions of alternatives, including preferred and no build with respective traffic control schemes and environmental, utility, and right-of-way impacts. A discussion of the alternatives should include pros and cons of the alternative. Right-of-way, utility, and environmental impacts should be summarized for each alternative. And also at least one alternative evaluated must be within the current highway plan total cost. And also it might be a good idea to include an overview of how maintenance of traffic would be accomplished. Should also be considered, because there may be an alternative that is more complicated than one than the other. Discussion of design exceptions, variances, and mitigation strategies. This section should discuss the design exceptions, variances to any of the elements within controlling criteria and why an exception or variance is needed. It should also be noted how this exception is being mitigated. For instance, if a lane width is reduced, it might be decided that more of the usable shoulder should be paved to counter this reduction. Or if you're in a curve, that you may include more striping and signing for that narrowing. Cost comparison table of alternatives versus highway plan. RU and C estimates shall be provided for each of the alternatives discussed in the DES. These should be compared to the current highway plan RU and C costs. And again, at least one of the alternatives shall have a total cost within 15% of the total highway plan cost. I really think it's important to have RU and C estimates for each of the alternatives discussed in the DES, because without knowing what your RU and C costs, how can you truly compare the different alternatives and come up with a preferred alternative? Discussion of preferred alternative cost is greater than 115% than the highway plan. If the preferred alternative cost, total cost, is greater than 15% of the highway plan total cost, then the discussion is needed to explain why the preferred alignment is over the budget set up in the plan. And it's also a good idea to discuss why that alternative is the better solution compared to the alternative that is within the highway plan. This will help facilitate further discussions and support for the chosen alternative if needed. Discussion of clear zone. The designer should discuss site-specific conditions, the existing clear zone along the corridor. For instance, if you have a project that's got trees for 2 miles that are within 10 foot of the roadway, then you've only got about an 8 or 10 foot clear zone. Where this rural or urban, your design speed, your project scope, and practicality of actually establishing a big clear zone for the project. Discuss the four-slope, back-slope combinations used for the proposed ditches and channels as compared to the charts in Chapter 3 of the Roadside Design Guide. And you can also refer to AASHTO's Roadside Design Guide, current edition, for detailed information about clear zone practices. Consideration for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Include a discussion about consideration of pedestrians and or bicycles within the project limits. Document the decision for the project and what accommodations are being provided or why accommodations are not needed. Determine if there are any local agency, regional master plans, or long-range plans in the area for bicycles and pedestrians. Existing facilities within or near the project limits, evidence or observance of use by pedestrians on the corridor. Are there any worn paths? Are there any local support or push by the local officials for the facility? You can refer to KYTC Design Manual HD 1500, AASHTO Guide for the Planning, Design, and Operation of Pedestrian Facilities, and AASHTO's Guide for the Development of Bicycle Facilities for more information. Water-related impact summary. Section 1 of the impacts checklist should be filled out for every alternative considered. In Section 2, the impact discussion should be completed for the preferred alternative only. This form is included in the DS because our DEA permitting section, they use this water-related impact summary to demonstrate to outside agencies that alternatives were evaluated during the preliminary engineering phase concerning impacts to the water-related areas of the project. The next section is the tier determination and signatures. The part of this new form, one of the biggest parts of this new form, is the setup of the various tiers to kind of help speed up the process of getting these reviewed and approved. The Tier 1 DS approvals, final approval requires signature of the location engineer. Environmental document type has to be less than a CE level 3, local or collector roadway classification, none NHS. Design year ADT has to be less than or equal to 1500. There can't be any design exceptions required for any of the controlling criteria. And the preferred alternative cost has to be less than or equal to 115% of the current highway plan. Or if you have a very low volume local road with an ADT of 400 or less, that can be with or without exceptions. And you still have to be a CE level 3 or less, and your cost has to be within 115% of the highway plan. If you meet all these requirements, you can use a Tier 1, and the final approval is with the location engineer. Tier 2 approval requires a signature of the location engineer and the TBM of the roadway branch. You have the same environmental document has to be a CE level 3 or less, local or collector roadway classification, none NHS. Design year ADT can be greater than 1500. There can be no design exceptions required for any of the controlling criteria, and the cost has to be within 115% of the current highway plan in order for you to use a Tier 2. The Tier 3 would require final approval from the location engineer, TEBM roadway branch, and the director of highway design. And basically, it's all projects not meeting Tier 1 and Tier 2 parameters. Some closing thoughts possible to allow for review and approvals. Per Highway Design Manual HD 203.6, projects administered by the KYTC Division of Highway Design shall require a DES unless an exemption is given by the division director. Include preliminary estimates for R, U, and C for each alternative discussed. These preliminary estimates are needed to make a true comparison between the alternatives considered. These will be kicked back to you if you don't have preliminary estimates for R, U, and C for each alternative. Discuss the pros and cons of each alternative, including impacts to the environmental, right-of-way, and utilities, and if MOT may be more complicated with the particular alternative. At least one of the alternatives shall be within the current highway plan budget. If there's only enough money set up to put up signs along the road, then that should be an alternative within your DES. Make sure the DES typical sections are legible. Only need to show information needed for the geometric elements and widths. The design executive summary can be submitted electronically for review and approval. Once the DES has been reviewed, the process be sent a PDF of the signed DES. A design executive summary tracking report has been developed by Jamie Anderson to help track the submittal and approval status of DESs. Please note that in order for the report to track this process, the PLNG inspection held dates need to be entered into the Oracle database. Also, entering info in the PLNG status remarks column helps to track status as well. This
Okay, yeah. It sounds like we actually lost audio there for about a minute, so I'm going to actually back up here and try to cover just a little bit of what we lost. So I apologize for any loss there. That was on my end. So here we go. We'll start over there. Actually, let me go back just a little bit more. This was previously recorded, so we can actually go back and listen to it again. I apologize for the loss of sound. That was my fault.
discuss the pros and cons of each alternative, including impacts to the environmental, right-of-way, and utilities, and if MOT may be more complicated with the particular alternative. At least one of the alternatives shall be within the current highway plan budget. If there's only enough money set up to put up signs along the road, then that should be an alternative within your DES. Make sure the DES typical sections are legible. Only need to show information needed for the geometric elements and widths. The design executive summary can be submitted electronically for review and approval. Once the DES has been reviewed, the project manager will be notified by the location engineer, and a link will be provided to the location for the marked up DES and ProjectWise. It basically goes in your project folder, the highway design working folder, in the project working document section. Once the DES is approved, the project manager, project development branch manager, location engineer, environmental coordinator, and consultant will be notified by email, along with a link to the location of the signed DES and ProjectWise. This would be in the project folder, contract plans and proposal, in the miscellaneous section. And also I should note that since the consultant doesn't have access to this folder, they will be sent a PDF of the signed DES. A design executive summary tracking report has been developed by Jamie Anderson to help track the submittal and approval status of DESs. Please note that in order for the report to track this process, the PLNG inspection held dates need to be entered into the Oracle database. Also, entering info in the PLNG status remarks column helps to track status as well. This report can be generated at the following location. And again, it's not letting me show you what that looks like. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here we go. All right. So you can see here, this is the report that's generated, and I think, if I'm not wrong, this is updated every morning between 8 and 9 o'clock. Here's the PLG inspection date that you would enter in the date that you had your inspection, and you'd also here's the remarks section that shows that you could put in here DES submitted to the location on so-and-so date. This gives you a good idea of its track. Here, DES approval dates. Some of these, there were some approved in March. There was one approved 7/23/2015. And that's all that I have. Again, I want to thank you for participating in this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. I apologize for that loss of sound there. That was my fault. It was a hardware issue. At any rate, and I also apologize for the technical issues that we had there with the links. But you do have the links, so you can type those in and get those. websites for yourself. So right now we're going to go ahead and move on to questions. Keith, are you there? Keith, can you hear us? Okay, I guess Keith isn't there right now. One of the things we can do, though, and we can try to answer our questions here. I'm a little... Okay, apparently we're having some technical difficulties on Keith's end. But what we can do is we can kind of go through some issues here. Okay. One of the questions is we might want to touch on why the DES is prepared. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to work out these technical difficulties here. Okay, what I'm going to try to do, let me go talk to someone here because I would like Keith to be able to speak with us here. Hold on just one moment for everybody. I apologize for the pause. Okay, we're trying to work it out here so that Keith can answer some of these questions for us. I apologize for the interruption, but we're actually having some issues with his computer, so we're going to bring him over to mine and see if he can answer some of these questions. So again, I apologize for the interruption. With that note, what I was going to talk about is what I discussed before is we have the ability to raise hands. I don't know if any of you all have a microphone set up like I discussed at the beginning of the webinar, but if you want to raise your hand at this point, we might be able to answer some questions for you if you have the ability to actually speak over a microphone. So you would actually go down in history. I know a couple of people had their hands raised during the webinar, but I don't know if that was on accident or on purpose. So if you want to try raising your hand, and we might be able to actually get you to go down the annals of history as being the first person to have a question answered audibly over a webinar. We've got Keith here, so we'll get him to answer some questions for us.
Okay, see here. I guess the first question might want to touch on why the DS is prepared in the first place. Well, the purpose of the DS is to capture the engineering decisions for the project. It's a roadmap that documents the decision process that's used to recommend a typical section and alignment for the project. So it's basically just a documentation of your geometric design for your project. is, yeah, let's see here. Your yeah, there's one down here that's on a DES I just completed. There was a section for headlight sight distance, but I did not see it on the form Keith is going over. We've actually taken that out of the latest version. AASHTO's done a lot of study that in the stopping sight distance that you're trying to get, whether it's crest, sag, even though your K factors and how you calculate is different, the bottom line is you want your stopping sight distance. It's for like 495 for 55 mile an hour. We just didn't see a relevance of breaking it all out, your horizontal crest and sag, so we put it back the way it was in the original DS and combined everything. Because in the sag vertical curve, you really don't have any issues unless you immediately go from a sag to a real sharp horizontal, or you have an overpass. So, at nighttime, you're able to see the tail light or the headlight coming at you. So we just didn't really see the need to separate it out anymore. So that's why it didn't show up. It's in the process of being updated and changed. The next one, what does project administered by Division of Highway Design mean? And that's we've tossed that around too. And I would say that if it's an HSIP project and it changes the typical, you may want to consider getting a DES completed but it's actually that's in another division, so we can't really tell them that they have to submit one. It's my solution would be to talk with your location engineer. Say, look, we've got this project. It's an HSIP. We're widening to 12 lanes. We're adding a turn lane, and see what they think. See if they need to run it up the ladder, and see if you actually need a DS. This is a gray area, and we have talked about it back and forth, and it's really not clear. Just you're probably better off just talking with your location engineer and seeing what they think and what Brad or the director thinks. Quick question: when will this new format be required? Currently, chapters 100 and 200 they've been reviewed. They're ready to go out. Mr. Julick's working on a release memo to release these two chapters, and once this memo does go out, then we will probably expect you to start using the new form on any new submittals before after you have your PL and G. It's optional now. You can decide to use it if you want to right now, but you really don't have to until after the design memo that releases chapters 100 and 200 come out, which should be, we're hoping, before the design conference. What's the difference between the selected and recommended? Well, usually there probably won't be. It just gives you an opportunity if you select a 35 mile per hour design speed, and then for some reasons in your recommended, your radius only meets at 25 or 30. It just allows you a chance to show that there is going to be an exception just for that one element with the speed you selected. But normally your selected and your recommended will be the same. Yeah. Can we be sent a PDF of the seminar? That's actually what the attachment was. Is the handout that was included in the webinar is actually a PDF of the PowerPoint that I used. Can the preferred alternative move forward in development without a DES? Well, hopefully, once you have your PLNG, you'll submit that thing as soon as you can, and hopefully it'll get turned around here, and that won't be an issue. But really and truly, the PLNG selects the preferred alignment, and as the design manual will spell out whenever it is released, the DES is the actually official approval of the geometrics for that alignment. Hopefully that won't be an issue. Hopefully we'll have the DS approved in time for you to start on your preferred alignment.
Okay, I apologize for that. I don't know if we're going to have anybody who actually wants to raise their hand or not. If not, we'll go ahead and I guess end out the webinar. Actually, we have a couple more questions here. One more question. What is an appropriate amount of hours for preparing a DES? Any idea on that?
That's project specific, it's too project specific. That's project specific.
Yeah.
Working with the district, if it's a large project, that would take longer. We have a lot of alternatives to discuss.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, basically, it comes down to the typical engineering answer of it depends. It all depends on its project specific, size of the project, your ability to actually fill out the form, the number of alternatives exactly. There's a bunch of different variables there that could actually cause it to be more or less hours for preparing the DES. And I guess what it comes down to is whatever it takes to get it done, just like any project. That's a good question. It's just kind of your experience on how to prepare a DES and how long that would take. It's an estimate. What would be a typical turnaround for a DES approval on a small project, assuming all information is submitted as necessary?
Well, if it's a small project, it'd be a tier 1. And it would just, the location engineer will be the one assigned to that year. So just as quick, as soon as they have their PLG, they submit the DES, and the location engineer looks at it for comments, and probably within a couple of weeks, I think, after PLG, if it for a tier 1, you have it.
Okay, so basically a couple of weeks. That's great. Here's a question: can the preferred alternate move forward in development without a DES approval?
That's what Mr. Al, I think I answered that earlier. Again, as soon as you have your PLG, you should work on your DES and get that submitted and get it into the process. Hopefully that won't be an issue. I guess officially the DES should be approved before you go into phase 2.
Right.
And hopefully we'll do better in getting those through the system. That's why we built the tier system.
Great. Okay. Well, Keith, I appreciate it. I think we're going to end our questions there. I appreciate all the questions, and I hope they all got answered to your satisfaction. Again, Keith, I appreciate it. Thank you for bearing with us with the technical difficulties, and I appreciate you all bearing with us with our technical difficulties. We apologize for that, and we hope you all learned everything. Again, I'd like to remind you all to wait, if you could, for the survey at the end of our webinar. Sometimes it takes a little time to spin up. So if you could just wait and answer that, because again, it really helps us a lot in preparing these webinars and trying to get you what you want, and also telling us what you've learned during these webinars. So we hope you come back next time. Again, thank you to Keith. Thank you to everybody that attended, and we'll see you next time.